I am the person that hired Bill Furry in the legislature. I got to tell you, it was the easiest hire I had to make, that I ever made. And I've made a lot of hires because I used to work for the Energy Commission and the various offices in the legislature. And his background was just exemplary. And he looked at issues in a very, very skeptical and objective way. He had a philosophy, basically was think before you believe. But he had the ability to add something to that, and basically it was think and analyze before you believe. And he had the background that allowed him to do that. And I'm going to mention one case in point, and that had to do with money for disadvantaged children. And the analysis that he was doing showed that in a lot of districts that had a lot of kids, they got money. But there were a lot of other districts that also had a lot of kids, but they didn't get any money. And so he did an analysis of this, and when Democratic staff showed it to Willie, Willie said, well, we're going to have to include this in the budget negotiations with the Republicans. It's going to have to be part of the budget. And basically that year, he got $100 million for this.
Oh, wow.
And that was every year. I mean, I just did a rough calculation, probably close to $1 billion. Now the rules have changed a little bit now. Jerry changed them, but this feature I think he kept in there. So it's a very, very important. But that's what Bill was able to accomplish, and he was able to accomplish that because he had the analysis to make the point. It's just extremely, extremely important. I called and talked to a lot of Democratic members and staff to get a gauge on how Bill was interpreted and what they thought about him. Usually you would talk to Republican staff because he was working for the Republican staffs. But you get a better gauge when you talk to the opposition. You get a little bit more truthful evaluations. And I thought I might read to you a lot of comments that I got from Bob Campbell. Bob Campbell was especially important because he was the chairman of the Budget Committee on Education that Bill had to was staffing for the Republicans. Bill Furry, I considered him among the brightest and impacted education and the process more than they realized at the time. Even though we were from different political parties and in different political persuasions, we saw each other in a different light. And the one thing we came away with regarding Bill, and this is we being the Democratic side, was Bill, what was his great mind and his soft light side. I got to tell you, they all talked about his humor. And he made these meetings that we had to have palatable. I could always get my gauge on how things were going in the committee by looking across the dais at Bill and the expression on his face. From "you are kidding me" to the slight nod of his head saying, "that will work." He was my gauge on how the Republicans, Mary Ann, Bill Leonard, Bill Jones, or others would react to the issue at hand. He will be sorely missed, not just by his wife and children, but all of us who were lucky enough to have spent time with him. I am sorry that I didn't have time to spend with him these past years. Please give my most profound sympathy to his family on their terrible loss. And that was from Assemblyman Bob. I would just like to add that Bill Furry will always be with us, and it was a pleasure to work with him. Thank
you. I'm Julie Son Rodriguez, and I actually work for Bill. I'm going to read. So when I heard about Bill's passing, I was really deeply saddened and began reflecting on his influence on my life. I realized that his impact continues to be with me even today. I came to the Governor's Office of Child Development and Education in 1993 as a temporary office assistant and not knowing what I wanted to do in my life. A position opened up in the Ledge Unit that Bill ran, and Bill encouraged me to give it a try. But I had so many reasons why I couldn't do it, and two big ones. One is I knew nothing about education policy, and two, I knew nothing about the ledge process. So that was two big problems. But he believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. He said, "I don't think I can do this." He's like, "You can do this. You can do this." So he really believed in me. So he took me under his wings and really mentored me over the years. He taught me so much professionally and gave me a wonderful foundation, which allowed me to have a career in education. And I was able to stay with the office, which became the Secretary of Education. So I lasted through 10 secretaries and 3 administrations. And I owe that all to Bill. Now, you know, he provided me with that foundation, so I was able to carry on. So. He was really proud of his family and all their accomplishments. He spoke of Allison and John often. I remember him showing me, I think it was the Sacramento Bee paper about his daughter being ranked. I think it was something related to volleyball. Yeah. But I knew Bill's kids went to Country Day, and I thought, you know, if I have kids someday, you know, I'm sending my kids to Country Day too. Because that's where Bill sent his kids, so of course it's got to be a good school. But he never told me about the price tag. So when my husband and I were looking for our son, you know, I think Country Day was $16,000 at the time.
A Russian like that.
Yeah. But that was kindergarten only. $16,000 for kindergarten. So needless to say, we opted for the Catholic school down the street. So. But he talked about his wife, Alice, who I knew was big in the reading world. Bill was working hard on behalf of the governor to promote many of these same efforts that Alice was working on. I know others will talk about all the important initiatives that he had a hand in. I remember the ABC bills, the Alpert, Burton, Conroy bills that he worked on, which related to the inclusion of phonics and, you know, basic computation skills in our instruction materials, along with the monumental effort of changing the state's assessment system. I thought it was funny when Bill retired from our office, they filled this position with 2 people. It just demonstrated the amount of work that he produced and the wealth of knowledge he had. One thing I do remember is that he read the Wall Street Journal every day and knew a lot about finances. So one day when I couldn't make any sense of my 401k and the investments, I went to Bill. So along with being a mentor, he also became my financial advisor. And he explained the differences and how I should start thinking of diversifying my portfolio, which I'm like, I don't know what that means, but okay. But to this date, I still haven't made any changes to the for my 401k, which the same recommendations that Bill gave me back in the 90s. So I know that's a problem. But yeah, so I haven't made any It's been good. It's been good. So he's had so much, in my life. He's really been a big part of it. I met my husband at the same office, and one of the last times I saw Bill was at our wedding. I remember seeing Bill as we left the church and was heading toward the memorial auditorium for our reception. I remember being panicked because I saw Bill and we kind of waved, and But he had RSVP'd no, since Alice was going to be out of town that weekend. So, but I later found out from a friend that he wanted to be at the actual ceremony because that was the most important part of the wedding, to show his support. And that, to me, was Bill. He had an understated presence while being very supportive. He talked about his travels and was really exploring South America at the time. When I was in the office. Our family has adopted his sense of travel and adventure and learning about the world. We haven't been to South America yet, but when we do, we will do it in remembrance of Bill. I just wanted to leave you with the only piece of life advice that he gave me, which I still carry with me today. And Bill told me, he's like, this is the one thing I'll tell you, is life is too short, so make sure you always work hard and play hard.
I think we have Roger. Here he comes.
I first met Bill in 1985. At the time, I was working for the Sequoia Institute, which was a tiny public policy institute located on 21st Avenue or 21st Street. And we were putting on a series of conferences about choice in education around the country, and one of them was in Sacramento. And I have a very distinct recollection of Bill being present because there were only about 6 people in the audience. And 2 of them were from the Sequoia Institute. But Bill was there. He stayed for almost the entire time, and then he got a hold of me later and said he thought there were some interesting things. He said there's not a snowball's chance in hell you're going to do any of this, but it was interesting to hear what he had to say. And so I didn't have any contact with Bill again until I started working for the legislature, and that was in 1989. And the following year, I took over the policy committee, the Education Policy Committee, and Bill handled the fiscal aspects of education. He worked on the what was then the Ways and Means Committee. And when Alice asked if I could say a few words and perhaps bring up a recollection of Bill, the first thing that popped into my mind is what I associate with him all the time, and I'm not sure why, but those of you who have an association with the legislature will appreciate this. Because the first year that I was doing the education work, we had a bill that went through the Assembly, went over to the Senate, and then came back after having been amended. And my job was to review it before it went to the floor of the Assembly when it came back with concurrence and amendments. And I was horrified to see that the bill had been changed completely. It had been gutted in the Senate and they put something else in. I hadn't experienced this before. And so I can tell you it's more commonplace than I realized at the time. But anyway, I saw this, and when I prepared my analysis, I mentioned that this had happened, that the bill had been completely changed. There had been no hearing in the Assembly where members would have an opportunity to make statements. And so, as if to emphasize the point, I said, if you are someone who supports a unicameral legislature and would like to see it work here, go ahead and vote for the bill. Now, this is what those of you who were involved with the legislature will appreciate. It turned out somebody actually read my analysis, and that person was Jerry Philando. Those of you who didn't have the opportunity to know Jerry missed an intense, active, enthusiastic, mercurial, and some other adjectives individual. And when Jerry saw this about a unicameral legislature, he had a fit. I was across the street. Bill was in the building. It was an education bill. He got on the phone and said, "Furry, get down here right away." And Bill was thinking, what in the world could this be? Bill gets into the assembly chambers, and Jerry goes over and says, "Why weren't we told we have a bill that's going to create a unicameral legislature?" Bill said, "What are you talking about?" And so Jerry said, "Just look at this analysis." And so Bill read the analysis, and as he did it, he just thought, "Oh, Roger, why did you do this? And he said, Jerry, I think this is a symbolic statement. Roger was just trying to illustrate the point that the bill had been amended in the Senate and you hadn't heard it. So finally, Jerry calmed down and said, okay, fine, we'll do it. And it was at that point, Bill went back to the office and he called me and he related what I've just mentioned to you. And he said, Roger, I'm going to ask you, he said, this is the first year you started doing this. And he says, I want to request that in the future you be a little less symbolic and a little more direct. So I took that to heart. The other point I want to leave you with is that I always thought of Bill as the member of the Apache Nation who was in our caucus. And where this comes from is that some of you, again, who are involved with the legislature will remember a fellow named Stuart Marshall who worked for the Legislative Analyst's Office. And Stuart was a terrific fellow. He handled education issues. And he and I were talking one time, and he mentioned that in his earlier days he had worked on an Apache reservation. He was in, I'm sorry, I said Apache, Navajo reservation in the Southwest. And he said one thing he always remembered was that their habit of conversation was different from what he was used to. He said when they would talk to one another and someone would make a statement, the person to whom the statement was directed would pause for 30 seconds or a minute or sometimes longer before responding. And he said, you know, if you're not used to it, it's very disconcerting, but he said after a while you realize it's a sign of respect and an opportunity to consider. And that's what I remember about Bill. That he would listen, you would make statements, and he would lean back, and his eyes would narrow, and he would say, well, yes, but, or no, but, and he was the Navajo member of our caucus.
Those are all great, aren't they? We're lucky to have that. So, now we're up to the early 90s. And I am carried away with a whole body of research documents that tell me that California has finally the possibility of solving its age-old problem of children who are smart and can do it, but have problems learning to read, and there is an answer. So I carry my packet of research documents, and I'm passing them out, Republicans, Democrats, governor, everybody. And one person who took that seriously was the then Secretary of Education under Pete Wilson. And she said, we're going to back you on getting these changes through. And she gave me a great present. She gave me Bill Furry. And he was many wonderful things that you heard. And he was also a Republican, which at that time was considered a pretty good thing. At that time. So he and I began this whole thing. It was referenced Julie about the ABC bills, of figuring out the right way. He was so smart. And he read, this is the part that you have to love, all of you who are reading lines. He read the research, and he got it. So many people, he was not an educator. He was just smart. And he read it and he got it, and then we sat down and wrote the bills. And then we handled it. He handled the Republican side of the aisle, and I the Democratic side, and that's what happened. Then on this tour, I said to him, as I was handing out packets of research to everybody read it, don't you have a wife in education? Most of you who know Bill, many of you, know Bill through Alice. I learned about Alice through Bill. So I said, "Don't you have a wife?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, so I said, "Okay, so give me your number," because I was calling everybody. And there was Alice first. So hi, and you have I know you're at Sac County, and you know about the new reading research? And she said, "Well, not exactly." I said, "Okay, I'm sending it to you." So I did that. That was very smart. One of the smart things I was ever able to do. And,
she gave me a month to read it.
but in a week, I called her back because some important people in the research field were coming to California, and after all, I'd called her a whole week ago. Surely she would have some staff who would be willing to go to hear the great minds in this new effort. So she called me back and she said she was really sorry. I think Allie had some volleyball
friends.
and others for some reason couldn't go, but one person could and offered to do it. Marilyn.
Oh, Marilyn. Oh, how wonderful.
So then this is the part. So then I am delegated to pick up Marilyn and Reed Lyon, who was the big chief of the research, at the Sacramento airport and drive them to Yosemite. You cannot believe what my children think about that. You drove them to Yosemite, Mom? Anyway, that was sort of the beginning. And then you know what happened. So Bill was remarkable to work with. He was all the things that Roger and Steve and say, and we did win, and the rest is history. But that wasn't the end of our relationship. So as I became very good friends with Alice and Bill, there was a different side of Bill that I think you should all know about. He was really an artist. He had an aesthetic sense that was quite remarkable. And so Alice, I'm not sure that was Bill's decide to do the landscaping and do the backyard.
It's because I just couldn't stand
You
it.
couldn't stand
I
it.
didn't like being
So I
out
was
there.
assigned, and Bill was assigned to work together to create this magical outdoor space. And next to reading, and my grandchildren, that's the most important thing, is being a gardener. So we went to buy pots, giant pots, one trip, 1 year. Then we did plants. You remember when everybody contributed to the fountain? Yes. Bill and I did the fountain. And I thought, here's this really kind of tough-minded, political guy, and analytical, and all the things that everybody said. But he was spot on. I was so impressed with his aesthetic. Of course, it agreed with my taste.
And there were a few. What color are the paint?
Yes, that's right. Oh, no, so then we're about to, there's one little space where you can actually plant something in the ground, because they took out the hot tub. So I had helped many people deal with gardens and plan. And coming from the old English school of landscape, there's a lot of blue and lavender and pink and white and all those colors, right? That's what we do. Keogh's an example of the garden. And then Alice comes cheerily and says, Bill has just painted the fence. Oh, good, it needed painting. So what colors? Red, orange, green. Yeah.
You're into pink.
Red, orange, green. Just about passed up. Throw away the plan. A new plan emerges. So Alice and Bill, and this time Alice came with us. We switched to the new red, orange, gold. So I think about how lucky I was, and of course his wonderful collection, which you see parts of it. And I thought his photography was superb, and I hope that all of you get to see it at some point. I think there should be a showing, and Allie, you should persuade your mom to do that. I always thought his photography was wonderful. And of course, the other thing was his being a great chef. He was a creative spirit, and Julia Child's under his right arm, and every day was an experiment. And I got to have many of those meals and shared them with them.
I came armed with my audio-visual aid, having once been a kindergarten teacher. And as I gazed upon this piece of crystal, I realized that this is a metaphor for our Bill Furry. Multifaceted and brilliant. The more one ponders this remarkable man, the more fascinating and intricate the facets become. His intellect, talents, attributes rival comparison in range and eclecticism. Enduring love of beauty, evidenced by collections of exquisite objets d'art in furry manner. Quest for adventure in myriad road trips near and far. Lewis and Clark spring to mind. Deft navigation of the Sacramento capital scene. Just ask our dear Mary. Technological prowess. Luddites beware. Excuse me, I have to turn a page here. Financial management par excellence, freeing Alice to pursue her strong commitment to education. Precision and excellence in research, as his Rand colleagues attest. Mastery of the culinary arts, with furry guests inevitably clamoring for seconds. Superior landscape designs, manifested in the bubbling fountain, beautiful garden, and delightful fencing. Created in cahoots with his buddy Mary. Supportive and loving father of Allison and John. The ideal, independent husband for our independent Alice. A perfect team of love, loyalty, and respect. The sum of these unique facets confirms that Bill Furry, now you know this is coming, was truly a good egg.
Well, Alice asked me to speak a little bit about the early years. Most of you probably are not aware Bill did anything before he came to Sacramento. He went to work for the state, but he actually did. We grew up in Pacific Palisades in Southern California. Before it was a mecca for the Hollywood elite. The closest we got to a star at the time was Bob Denver, was the playground director at the local Catholic school before he became Gilligan. So, we knew him. Also, living down the street, author Henry Miller of Tropic of Cancer fame. He lived down the street, but he would go out walking, and we had strict instructions that we were never to speak to him. So, for which we didn't understand why, but those were the rules. Other than that, we had a very, very typical, I think, upbringing. We both played Little League. We were both Eagle Scouts. Bill was a very avid surfer. He used to, during high school, and he would travel from Mexico to Monterey looking for the ultimate wave with a group of guys. And, see, nobody knew that. But for a few years, surfing was his life. Bill was the first class to enter a brand new high school in the Palisades. Palisades High School opened in 1962. And Bill went in as a junior, so he was the first class to go all the way through. He was definitely a superstar in high school. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. He was the quarterback of the football team, threw the first touchdown pass in the school's history. He was the pitcher on the baseball team. Hit the first home run in school's history. And he was the first student body president. So he left quite a legacy there. And of course, he was voted the most likely to succeed. And both the balls, the baseball and the football, are still on display in the gym if you're in the neighborhood. You can see it. After graduation, Bill went off to Harvard, and he had aspirations of playing football for Harvard. But in the first week of practice, he realized he was about half the size of everybody else. And so that ended his college football career. He moved on to his studies. And after his sophomore year, he decided he felt he needed to take a year off to find himself. So he came back to LA, took a job driving a cab out of LAX and other parts of town. But then he decided that wasn't really where the money was. So he took a job driving a good humor truck. And that was good until some kid pulled a gun on it. So that was the end of that career. And he returned to Harvard in the fall. And then from Harvard, he went on to Stanford to do his graduate work, and where he met Alice. So, I mean, that kind of sums up the first 21 years. And, you know, as his little brother, he was a very tough act to follow. And I didn't. But that's a whole other story we don't need to go into. So, that's about it.
It's my turn. Well, once I heard that this event was happening, the first thing that really sprung in my mind, and my mother reiterated, is, what are you going to wear?
That sounds like you, Al.
And I just thought, oh God, I need a new dress. I need a new dress. And I looked and looked in New York after work. It was freezing cold. I had to take off 5 layers to put a dress on, and it didn't fit. And take it off and put on more clothes back on and go to another shop, and it was just too much. And I thought, God, God is just talking to me and saying, you don't need a new dress. You have plenty of dresses. Like, I don't understand this, Allison. Why do you always need a new dress? So, in his honor, I'm wearing an old dress. You might have seen before. But, sometimes he did understand that you needed a little luxury in your life, and that would happen when we would travel to Mexico. And, you know, we would have an itinerary. He would want to go to see some potters, and we would go into their studios and look at their pots and talk to them about, you know, their process and things like that. And we would be staying in motels, $25 a day, right? And, you know, maybe some warm water, you know. He'd feed me, you know. But the deal was that I got to go fishing, or I got to go swimming in the ocean, which is always what my ideal Mexico trip would include. So we would go down. He took me to Zihuatanejo one time, and this was a place he had gone to in the 60s, and said, this is the best enclave. You know, there's surfing, Allison, there's fishing, there's everything that you could want. So we went down there, and he let me pick out the hotel, you know, $45 a night. Real luxury, you have no idea. And there was a beachfront, and I got to go swimming. And, you know, he took me out fishing. He's like, all right, you really want to do this fishing thing, right? I said, yes, I want to do this fishing thing. So he paid the guy, Guillermo, that night. He's like, all right, you come back at 7:45 in the morning, we'll go out fishing. So he's like, okay, you know, here's half the money. So we go and we show up 7:45 in the morning, we get on this boat, and he goes, Allison, you better catch something. This is the most boring morning of your life. So he has his Coke, he drinks that, he lays down, closes his eyes, you know, after, you know, his night of tequila, and I didn't quite realize that was why he was so tired, but I was like, no, we're going to catch something, and, you know, Guillermo is the captain of our ship, is trying as hard as he can, you know, to circle about, and, you know, they haven't caught much in the last few days, so he was a little skeptical if we would actually catch something, but he saw a marlin out there, and he started to track it. He said, sit in the chair, sit in the chair. So I sat in the chair, I got the, you know, the rod in my hand, and he started reeling. Dad finally wakes up. What's going on? Wait, action? You have something on the line? And so he's shooting pictures now. He's all into it. He's like, this is the best trip ever. So we finally get the fish on the line and close to the ship, and Guillermo, the captain, is helping me pull it in. It's this massive 75-pound marlin. Wow. And Dad's shooting pictures like he's never shot before. And you know, we let the fish go, but it made it all worthwhile, and we both got what we wanted out of our trips. We always had a really good time, and it was a unique experience to get to travel with your dad by yourself, and, you know, just experience how he sees the world, and, you know, those are the things that you get to take with you. And he always taught the stuff doesn't matter, because you should be able to pack up and put everything into your car that you own and take it with you. So, you know, you can take, I've pared some of my stuff down, but I'll definitely take these experiences traveling with me. So.
It's amazing how what we've heard today is so connected